Hey everybody, how's it going? My name is Chris with Code Foils and Green Hat Kiteboarding, and I'd like to welcome you to my dock start tutorial series. Just like every other discipline in foiling, dock starting has a pretty steep learning curve. And my goal with this series is to give you some pointers and hopefully help you avoid some of the mistakes that I made when I was learning to dock start. So even though it's a beautiful day down here at the dock, before we jump in, let's talk about gear selection. With every discipline, there's always a board, a mast, a foil, a fuselage, and a tail that make learning and progressing easier. And dock starting's the same thing. So let's talk about the gear that's gonna make it easier for a beginner to get their first glides away from the dock. So your dock start board, it is pretty much just something to stand on. As you're learning though, it can be a couple different things. A good dock start board for someone who's proficient tends to be pretty minimal. It's narrower, shorter, and thinner. Basically what that'll translate to is something that feels pretty good underfoot. If you're turning, there's less board to contact the water, but that's for someone who has a little bit of experience. If you're learning, having a board with a little bit more volume is not a bad thing. A lot of people will learn on smaller prone foil boards, and that can have a few benefits. So one is the extra volume. If you have to swim back to your dock, having that underneath your chest while you paddle back makes things easier and maybe a little safer. A lot of prone foil boards tend to have a bottom shape that releases well from the water. If you land on your board and you're slapping close to the water, those shapes will release pretty well and you'll be able to push against that extra volume. Also, they're a little bit wider, a little bit longer. If you land on them in a less than ideal location, it's not as critical. So take that information with what you will. If you already have a smaller prone board laying around, you might already have something that's good to learn on. There really isn't a bad choice on the market for a dock start board. All of them are pretty good at this point. So let's talk about foils. There are a few key characteristics of a good beginner dock start foil. The first one is you want good low end lift. The second one is you want it to be fairly forgiving. And the third is it should be appropriate to your weight. So for me, the Code Foil 1725S checks all those boxes. It's very easy to start. I feel like I can land on it pretty bad and still pump away from the dock. And that 1725 square centimeters is good for me. I'm about 175 pounds. And even more with a 5'4" wetsuit on this time of year. I'm probably pushing close to 200 pounds wet. But depending on what you weigh, you can change that size, bigger or smaller. The larger span offerings on the market can be a lot easier to start. They'll glide better, but sometimes it's easy to get bucked off those super wide span foils. And these smaller ones tend to move with you more. And also, don't be afraid of outgrowing a beginner-friendly dock start foil, because this being a very beginner-friendly dock start foil is still in my quiver. I still like to have a foil that's easy to start if I go to a dock that I'm not familiar with, or maybe I'm starting off of something else like a rock, or I'm just using it for a different discipline. A lot of the offerings on the market nowadays tend to translate well to a good light wind winging foil, light wind parawing, downwind, or surf foil. So if you need to justify your purchase, you'll have it around and have it for other reasons. So let's talk about your mast. This can largely be dictated by the height of your dock. So for instance, this dock is pretty low to the water. A 75 centimeter mast works pretty well. One of the other docks I start off is a bit higher, and an 80 centimeter mast works pretty well. So for me, I tend to ride an 80 centimeter mast all the time. This is the Code Foils 80 plus mast, very stiff. I don't really have a dock high enough that would warrant a longer mast. I use an 80 centimeter mast for most everything. Prone, downwind, winging, being bad at parawing. So if you're choosing a new mast for dock starting, some of the things that I would look for is it stiff, and is it an appropriate length for your dock? So a good pointer might be to borrow a buddy's mast if you don't have one, and go to your local dock and just see what feels comfortable bending over. So with the foil in the water and holding the mast here about where your board would be, that should feel pretty comfortable. If you have to bend over really far, it's just going to make things harder at first. The more awkward you feel, the harder it's going to be to jump onto your board and pump away. So mast choice can be fairly personal, but some of the things that you want are a stiff mast and one that's going to be the right size for you. So let's talk about your fuselage. So do yourself a favor, if you're learning how to dock start with no foiling experience, go with a longer fuselage. What happens to a lot of people in the beginning is they'll jump off the dock and land on their board too front foot heavy and pearl the nose into the water, or they'll do the opposite where you run off the dock, jump on your board, and you're not committed and you land too far back and your board and foil just shoot off into space in front of you. All that is learning how to deal with pitch sensitivity. And the longer, the easier it is to overcome pitch instability. If you already have a foiling background, you can probably go a little bit shorter. For a beginner, I'd completely recommend a longer fuselage. And lastly, the stabilizer. So same thing with the fuselage. For a beginner, I would recommend a bigger tail. And for the same reason, it just helps with that pitch stability. It also slows down the whole system a little bit. So you need even less speed to get the foil to engage and pump away. And that's going to be your friend when you're figuring out where to put your feet and then how to project yourself forward jumping off the dock. So bigger fuselage, bigger tail in whatever ecosystem that you are going with. Those are generally going to be things that will set you up for success. So I really appreciate you all tuning into my dock start tutorial. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Green Hat, or you can reach out to me. I'm SpaceX Truckin' on Instagram. And also make sure to like and subscribe. Have a good one, and let's get you pumping.